What started as routine promotion turned into television's most explosive confrontation when Brad Pitt challenged Jimmy Kimmel's credibility live on air, leading to an unprecedented meltdown that shocked millions of viewers. The studio lights blazed with their usual intensity as Jimmy Kimmel adjusted his tie and flashed that trademark smirk toward the camera. Tonight's show promised to be another routine Hollywood promotional circuit stop, with Brad Pitt scheduled to discuss his latest passion project about sustainable housing initiatives. The audience buzzed with anticipation, phones already recording, as they waited for one of cinema's biggest stars to grace the stage. Pitt emerged from backstage with his characteristic easy confidence, waving to the crowd as he settled into the guest chair. The initial banter flowed smoothly enough. Jokes about aging gracefully, references to past films, and the usual late-night television rhythm that both men had navigated countless times before. But beneath Kimmel's jovial exterior, something seemed different tonight. His questions carried an edge, a subtle aggression that hadn't been present in their previous encounters. "So, Brad, you're really passionate about this housing thing now," Kimmel began, his tone already carrying a hint of mockery. "Tell me, is this another one of those celebrity causes where you show up for photos and then disappear when the cameras stop rolling?" Pitt's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the practiced Hollywood smile faltering for just a moment. "Actually, Jimmy, I've been working on this for over 3 years. We've built homes for over 200 families so far. It's not a publicity stunt." Right. Kimmel nodded, but his eyes gleamed with something that looked suspiciously like malice. "Just like when you were saving New Orleans, right? How did that work out exactly?" The audience sensed the tension building, the laughter becoming more nervous and scattered. This wasn't the playful ribbing that late-night television was known for. This felt personal, calculated, and increasingly uncomfortable. Pitt leaned forward slightly, his voice maintaining its measured tone despite the obvious provocation. "The Make It Right Foundation built over 100 homes in the lower Ninth Ward. Families who lost everything in Katrina got a second chance. I'm proud of that work." "Oh, you're proud," Kimmel repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Even though half those houses are falling apart now? Even though families are suing your foundation? Tell me, Brad, how does it feel to build someone hope just to watch it crumble?" The studio fell silent. This had crossed every line of professional courtesy, moving far beyond typical late-night banter into something darker and more personal. Pitt's jaw tightened, and for the first time in the interview, his movie star composure began to crack. "Jimmy, I think you need to check your facts," Pitt said, his voice still controlled but carrying a new warning. "We worked with architects, engineers, and the community to create innovative, sustainable housing. Yes, there were some issues with a few homes, and we addressed them. But to sit here and suggest that we exploited people's suffering for publicity is not just wrong, it's disgusting." Kimmel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the reaction he'd provoked. "Disgusting? That's a strong word from someone who walked away from his foundation when things got complicated. You know what I think, Brad? I think you're just another Hollywood hypocrite who uses charity work to make himself feel better about living in a bubble." The audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Several people in the front rows looked genuinely uncomfortable, while others held up their phones, realizing they might be capturing television history. Pitt stood up abruptly, his famous calm finally giving way to visible anger. "You know what, Jimmy? I came here tonight to talk about helping people find affordable housing, to use whatever platform I have to make a difference. But instead you want to tear down legitimate charitable work for cheap laughs and ratings." "Sit down, Brad," Kimmel said, but his commanding tone only seemed to fuel Pitt's frustration. "No, I won't sit down," Pitt shot back, his voice rising for the first time. "You want to know what's disgusting? It's using your show to attack people who are actually trying to make a difference while you sit behind this desk making jokes about other people's struggles." The confrontation was spiraling beyond anyone's control, and backstage, Producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. Kimmel's face flushed red as he realized his guest wasn't backing down. He'd clearly expected Pitt to absorb the attacks with typical Hollywood grace, but instead found himself facing someone who refused to be bullied on national television. The host's trademark smugness began morphing into something uglier, raw indignation that his authority was being challenged. "You know what your real problem is, Brad?" Kimmel snapped, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. "You think, because you're a movie star, you can lecture the rest of us about morality, but we all know what kind of man you really are." The implication hung in the air like poison. Everyone in the studio understood exactly what Kimmel was referencing: the highly publicized divorce, the custody battles, the tabloid speculation that had dominated headlines for years. It was the kind of personal attack that violated every unwritten rule of celebrity interviews. Pitt's eyes went cold. "Are you seriously going to sit there and bring up my family on your show, on live television?" "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Kimmel shot back, clearly intoxicated by his own perceived power. "You parade around as this humanitarian while your own house was falling apart. Maybe focus on your own problems before trying to solve everyone else's." The audience was now completely stunned into silence. Several people were visibly cringing, understanding they were witnessing a career-ending moment for someone. They just weren't sure who. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every uncomfortable second as two of Hollywood's most recognizable figures engaged in what felt more like a street fight than a talk show interview. "My family is off limits," Pitt said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Whatever issues you have with me, you leave my children out of this." But Kimmel had clearly passed the point of no return, drunk on his own perceived cleverness and the adrenaline of the moment. "Oh, now you care about protecting your kids? That's interesting timing." The words hit like a physical blow. Pitt took a step toward the desk, his hands clenched into fists. For a terrifying moment, it looked like the confrontation might turn physical. Security personnel near the stage tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Pitt said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "You sit in this studio every night making jokes about people's lives, treating real pain like entertainment. You're everything that's wrong with this industry." Kimmel stood up behind his desk, trying to reclaim some height advantage. "Everything wrong with the industry? That's rich coming from someone who—" "Stop!" Pitt cut him off with such force that Kimmel actually took a step back. "Just stop talking. You've already said enough." The studio was now dead silent except for the hum of cameras. Even the band members looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to intervene or simply hope the nightmare would end. This wasn't television anymore. It was a public destruction happening in real time. "You want to know what's wrong with Hollywood?" Pitt continued, his voice gaining strength. "It's people like you who think entertainment means destroying others. For ratings, you've turned cruelty into comedy and convinced yourself you're clever for it." Kimmel's composure was completely shattered now. The confident host who'd started the evening was gone, replaced by someone clearly in over his head. "You can't talk to me like that on my own show," he stammered. "Watch me," Pitt replied. The two words carried the weight of a declaration of war. Pitt moved closer to Kimmel's desk, his presence commanding the entire studio. The host, who moments earlier had been reveling in his perceived dominance, now looked genuinely rattled as he faced the full force of Pitt's anger. "You think this is funny?" Pitt demanded, gesturing toward the audience. "You think these people came here to watch you destroy someone's reputation for entertainment? This isn't comedy, Jimmy. This is character assassination." Kimmel tried to regain control, forcing a nervous laugh. "Come on, Brad. You're being a little dramatic, don't you think? It's just late-night television." "Just late-night television?" Pitt's voice rose again, his composure completely abandoned now. "You just attacked my parenting, my charity work, and my personal life on national television, and you want to dismiss it as just entertainment?" The audience was transfixed, watching what felt like a real-time career implosion. Several people in the front rows were recording everything on their phones, already knowing this footage would be worth millions in social media engagement. The band members sat frozen, their instruments silent as the confrontation consumed the entire studio. "Look, maybe I went a little far," Kimmel said, but his tone suggested he was offering damage control rather than a genuine apology. "But you have to admit, your foundation did have some problems." "No," Pitt cut him off sharply. "You don't get to walk this back now. You made your choice when you decided to use people's suffering as a punchline, when you brought my children into this." Backstage, producers were in full panic mode. The show's executive producer was frantically trying to communicate with the control room, gesturing wildly for them to cut to commercial. But the cameras kept rolling, capturing every explosive moment of what was quickly becoming the most controversial interview in late-night history. Kimmel's desperation was becoming increasingly obvious. "Brad, why don't you sit back down and we can—" "I'm not sitting down," Pitt interrupted, his voice echoing through the studio. "I'm not playing your game anymore. You invited me here under false pretenses, then ambushed me with personal attacks. That's not hosting. That's predatory behavior." The word predatory hung in the air like an accusation that couldn't be taken back. Kimmel's face went pale, understanding that Pitt had just used language that would define this confrontation in every news report and social media post that followed. "That's completely unfair," Kimmel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm just doing my job as a host." "Your job?" Pitt laughed bitterly. "Your job is to attack guests who come here in good faith? Your job is to exploit personal tragedy for ratings? If that's your job, then you're everything wrong with this business." The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing they were witnessing something that would be discussed and analyzed for years to come. Some looked horrified, others fascinated, but all understood they were watching two careers potentially end in real time. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Look, Brad, maybe we both got a little heated. Why don't we take a breath and—" "No," Pitt said firmly. "There's no walking this back. You showed everyone exactly who you are tonight. You're a bully who hides behind comedy to justify cruelty. You use your platform to tear people down instead of building them up." The accusation hit like a sledgehammer. Kimmel stood behind his desk, visibly shaking now, all pretense of control completely gone. The confident host who had started the evening by mocking his guests' charitable work was now facing the complete destruction of his own reputation. "You can't just—" Kimmel began, but Pitt was already moving toward the edge of the stage. "Watch me," Pitt said over his shoulder, his voice carrying across the stunned silence of the studio. He paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to face Kimmel one final time. The cameras captured every detail of his expression. Disappointment, mixed with disgust, and something that looked almost like pity. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy?" Pitt's voice was steady now, controlled and devastating. "I actually used to respect what you did. I thought you were one of the good ones in this business. But tonight, you've shown everyone that you're just another person who confuses meanness with wit." Kimmel stood frozen behind his desk, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The confident host who had begun the evening ready to tear down his guest was now completely exposed, his cruelty laid bare for millions to see. The studio lights that had seemed so warm at the beginning of the show now felt harsh and unforgiving. "Brad, please," Kimmel managed to stammer, but there was nothing left to say. The damage was complete, irreversible, and entirely of his own making. Pitt shook his head slowly. "No, Jimmy. You made your choice tonight. You chose to attack my family, my work, and my character for what? A few laughs? Some viral moments? You sold your soul for ratings, and everyone watching knows it." The audience remained absolutely silent, understanding they had witnessed something unprecedented. Several people were openly recording now, knowing this footage would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. The band members sat motionless, their instruments forgotten, as they watched the complete destruction of their host's credibility. "You want to know what real character looks like?" Pitt continued, his voice gaining strength. "It's continuing to help people even when cynics like you mock the effort. It's showing up for communities that need rebuilding even when the cameras stop rolling. It's protecting your family's privacy, even when hosts try to exploit your pain. For entertainment." Kimmel tried one last desperate interruption. "Brad, I think you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Pitt's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You attacked my children on national television, and you think I'm overreacting? That tells everyone everything they need to know about who you really are." The words hung in the air like a final judgment. Backstage, producers had completely given up trying to salvage the situation. This wasn't something that could be edited or spun. It was live television at its most raw and unforgiving. Pitt looked directly into the main camera, addressing the audience at home rather than the man who had ambushed him. "To everyone watching, tonight remember that celebrities are human beings with families, feelings, and flaws. We don't exist for your entertainment at any cost. We deserve the same basic respect you'd want for yourselves." He turned back to Kimmel one final time. "And to you, Jimmy, I hope someday you remember what it feels like to be a decent human being. Because tonight, you forgot completely." With that, Pitt walked off the stage with quiet dignity, leaving behind a studio full of stunned silence and a host whose career had just imploded on live television. Kimmel stood alone behind his desk, the weight of his actions finally hitting him as the reality of what he had done began to sink in. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Kimmel's devastated expression before finally cutting to commercial. But the damage was already done. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were spreading across social media platforms, generating millions of views and overwhelmingly supportive comments for Pitt's dignified response to Kimmel's unprofessional behavior. The incident sparked immediate industry-wide discussions about the responsibilities of talk, show hosts, and the treatment of guests. Kimmel's ratings plummeted in the following weeks, while Pitt's reputation was enhanced by his measured response to such a vicious attack. The confrontation became a defining moment that highlighted the importance of respect and professionalism in entertainment, proving that audiences still recognized decency when they saw it.